First contact and confusion. The Araxian research vessel Eternal Progress hung motionless against the backdrop of stars, its crystalline structure refracting light in ways that made it nearly invisible to most detection systems. Within its transparent chambers, first observer Nexus underwent another voluntary mutation, her iridescent skin shifting through patterns of deep purple and blue as she processed the data before her. For 10,000 years, the Araxian Dominion had reigned supreme across 12,000 worlds. Their mastery of biological adaptation had allowed them to evolve perfect solutions to every challenge they encountered. Each Araxian could reshape their body at will, optimizing themselves for any environment or situation. They were the pinnacle of evolution, or so they had believed. But now, as Nexus studied the transmissions from the newly discovered Earth, her perfect cellular structure trembled with uncertainty. The humans were wrong. Their genetic code was fixed, unchangeable. They required artificial tools and machines to survive in different environments. By every measure of evolutionary success, the Araxians understood. Humans should have gone extinct millennia ago. Impossible. Nexus transmitted to her crew, her thoughts carried through the ship's organic neural network. They maintain a technological civilization despite their biological stasis. They thrive despite their inability to adapt. This defies all known principles of species advancement. Second observer Karis, his form currently optimized for data analysis with an enlarged cranial cavity and multiple optical organs, responded with his own wave of confusion. Their cities show no standardization. Their vehicles lack uniformity. Even their dwelling places reject optimization. They build both underground bunkers and floating sky cities simultaneously, with no apparent attempt to determine which is superior. The more the Araxians observed, the more their confusion grew. Humans lived in every climate on their planet, from frozen wastes to burning deserts, but instead of evolving to match each environment, they used their primitive tools to survive. They had spread to other worlds in their system, establishing colonies by creating artificial environments, rather than adapting their bodies to match local conditions. Their method of advancement appears to be external. Nexus noted, her skin shifting to a troubled shade of green. Rather than improving themselves, they improved their surroundings. It's horrifically inefficient, yet the results could not be denied. In mere centuries, these unchanging beings had progressed from primitive chemical rockets to functional faster than light travel. They had expanded across their solar system and were now pushing into interstellar space. Their rate of technological advancement was unprecedented. Nexus initiated contact according to standard protocols, transmitting a request for communication on all frequencies. The response came not from the nearest human vessel, but from a small station orbiting a gas giant. The human who appeared on their view screen was physically unchanged from the ancient images they had observed in Earth's historical records. No optimization, no adaptation, just the same basic form their species had maintained for thousands of years. "This is Dr. Elena Rodriguez of Jupiter Station 7, the human said, showing no sign of awe at the Araxian's superior form. "Welcome to Sol Space. I apologize for any translation errors. We're still working on understanding your language patterns." Nexus shifted her vocal organs to produce sounds in the human's frequency range. "Your apology is noted but unnecessary. We have already adapted our communication systems to your primitive methods." She paused, expecting the human to show appropriate deference to such a display of superiority. Instead, Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "Impressive biological manipulation. Though I have to ask, why adapt yourselves to our communication method when a simple universal translator would work just as well? Seems like a lot of effort for a routine conversation." The question struck Nexus like a physical blow. Why indeed? The Araxian way had always been to adapt themselves to meet any challenge, yet this human suggested their solution was needlessly complex. Before she could formulate a response, Dr. Rodriguez continued, "I've been reviewing your initial transmission data. Your species' ability to modify your own biology is fascinating, though I imagine it must make maintaining a consistent society quite challenging. How do you handle personal identification when everyone can change their form at will? Again, Nexus found herself struggling to respond. The human was asking questions that had never occurred to the Araxians, pointing out potential flaws in systems they had always considered perfect. More troubling still, she was doing so with genuine curiosity, rather than the fear or envy Nexus had expected. Your questions are irrelevant, Nexus transmitted, her skin flickering with patterns of defensive crimson. We have come to evaluate your species' potential for inclusion in the Dominion. Your technological achievement, while crude, indicates some promise. With proper guidance, you could be uplifted too. Oh, that's very kind of you to offer, Dr. Rodriguez interrupted, still smiling. But before we discuss any kind of political arrangement, would you be interested in participating in a cultural exchange? We have so many questions about your biological capabilities, and I'm sure you must be curious about how we've managed to achieve so much without them. The humans' casual dismissal of the Dominion's authority sent ripples of distress through the Eternal Progress's organic circuits. This was not how first contact scenarios were supposed to proceed. Lesser species were meant to be awed by Araxian superiority, not treating them as equals or questioning their methods. As Nexus struggled to regain control of the conversation, she noticed something even more disturbing. The human station's sensors were probing the Eternal Progress with increasingly sophisticated scans, analyzing their biological technology with remarkable speed. They were learning, adapting their approach not through biological evolution, but through rapid technological iteration. Perhaps, Nexus transmitted slowly, her color shifting to a thoughtful shade of violet. We have much to learn from each other. The words felt strange, almost heretical, but she could not deny the evidence before her. These humans, with their fixed forms and artificial tools, had achieved things the Araxians had never even considered possible. The first seeds of doubt had been planted in the perfect garden of Araxian certainty. As Dr. Rodriguez began explaining human methods of adaptation through technology, Nexus realized that her species' upcoming encounter with humanity would challenge everything they thought they knew about evolution, progress, and the true meaning of superiority. The paradox of weakness. 3 standard cycles had passed since first contact, and the Araxian High Council was in unprecedented disarray. The chamber's biological walls pulsed with patterns of agitation as first observer Nexus presented her findings, her form now adapted for maximum clarity of communication. The human's resistance to biological optimization appears to be intentional, she reported, her voice carrying tones of disbelief. They have the technological capability to modify their genetic code, yet they choose to maintain their original form. They call it genetic preservation and consider it ethically important. The council members' surfaces rippled with patterns of confusion and dismissal. High Coordinator Vex, his form a perfect sphere of concentrated neural tissue, projected his thoughts with authority. Clearly, they fear change. Like all primitive species, they cling to their imperfections out of ignorance. With respect, Coordinator, Nexus countered, her color shifting to the deep blue of scientific certainty. The evidence suggests otherwise. They understand genetic modification thoroughly. They simply choose different paths of advancement. The data she shared through the chamber's neural network caused immediate disturbance. Humans had mapped their own genomes centuries ago. They had cured genetic diseases, extended their lifespans, and even created limited biological enhancements. But instead of pursuing perfect adaptation like the Araxians, they had deliberately chosen to maintain their basic form while developing external solutions to environmental challenges. Observe their space exploration methodology, Nexus continued. Rather than adapting themselves to survive in space, they created environmental suits. Instead of evolving to process different atmospheres, they built contained habitats. Their solution to surviving extreme environments was to change their surroundings rather than themselves. Inefficient, declared another council member. The energy required to maintain artificial environments far exceeds the cost of biological adaptation. Yet their method has advantages we never considered. Nexus pressed on. Their habitats can be used by any species. Their environmental suits can be mass-produced. Their solutions are shareable. The concept of sharing technological solutions rather than evolving individual biological ones sent waves of discomfort through the council chamber. The Araxian way had always been personal adaptation. Each individual evolved to meet challenges, achieving perfect harmony with their environment through biological change. But the humans' approach was fundamentally different. They created universal solutions that could be replicated and improved upon by others. Their weakness, their inability to adapt themselves, had driven them to develop technologies that worked for everyone. There's more. Nexus continued, her form shifting to display the next set of data. Their fixed form appears to drive innovation in unexpected ways. Because they cannot adapt their bodies to new situations, they are forced to think creatively, to imagine solutions that we would never consider necessary. The evidence was undeniable. Human history was filled with inventions that seemed absurd to the Araxians. Devices to see in the dark instead of evolving better eyes, machines to lift heavy objects instead of growing stronger muscles, vehicles to move faster instead of developing more efficient locomotion. But most disturbing of all, Nexus concluded, her color darkening to almost black, is their rate of advancement. Without the ability to adapt themselves, they have been forced to adapt their understanding of the universe instead. Their sciences advance at a pace we can barely comprehend. The council chamber erupted in patterns of agitation. It was true. In the 3 cycles since first contact, human scientists had already begun to grasp principles of Araxian biological technology that had taken their own species centuries to develop. They asked questions that had never occurred to the Araxians, approached problems from angles that seemed impossible, and proposed solutions that defied conventional wisdom. They make mistakes, one council member observed. Their scientific method is based on trial and error. They fail repeatedly before finding correct solutions. Yes, Nexus agreed, but they learn from each failure. Their imperfection drives them to consider multiple possibilities, to test different approaches simultaneously. Their weakness forces them to be creative. The word hung in the chamber like a challenge to everything the Araxians believed. Creativity had never been necessary in their society. When faced with a problem, they simply evolved the perfect biological solution. But the humans, trapped in their fixed forms, had to imagine new possibilities, had to think beyond the obvious, had to innovate. There is something else, Nexus added, her form shifting to reveal one final piece of data. Their fixed form appears to have led to another unexpected advantage: diversity of thought. Because they cannot change their bodies to match each other, they have learned to value different perspectives. Their scientific teams deliberately include individuals with varying viewpoints and approaches. The council absorbed this information in troubled silence. The Araxian pursuit of perfection had led them to standardize their thinking, to optimize their minds for efficiency and consistency. But the humans' unchanging nature had forced them to embrace diversity, to find strength in their differences rather than trying to eliminate them. And now they turn those diverse perspectives toward understanding us, Nexus concluded. They study our biology not to copy it, but to understand it in ways we never considered. They see patterns we missed, possibilities we never imagined, applications we never dreamed of. The council chamber's walls pulsed with patterns of deep concern. The humans' weakness had become their strength. Their inability to adapt had driven them to develop in ways the Araxians had never considered necessary. Their imperfection had led them to innovations that perfect adaptation had never required. As the council debated the implications of these revelations, none of them noticed that the very fact they were questioning their own perfection represented a fundamental change in Araxian thought. The humans' influence was already beginning to affect them in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. Battle of minds and methods. The Araxian vessel Perpetual Evolution drifted at the edge of human space, its crystalline surface now adapted for maximum sensor absorption. Within its chambers, Warform Commander Silex observed the approaching human fleet with growing concern. After months of rising tensions, the inevitable confrontation had arrived. "Their ships are disturbing," Silex transmitted to his crew. His current form, optimized for combat coordination, bristled with neural interfaces and enhanced sensory organs. No two vessels share the same design. They reject standardization, even in warfare. The human fleet was indeed a chaos of different shapes and sizes. Some ships were clearly purpose-built warships, sleek and heavily armed. Others appeared to be converted civilian vessels, mining ships retrofitted with weapons, or modular vessels that could be reconfigured on the fly. It defied all military logic. They waste resources building different designs when one perfect form would suffice. Secondary Commander Crit noted, his combat-adapted form radiating aggression patterns. Their inefficiency will be their downfall. But Silex wasn't so certain. First Observer Nexus's warnings echoed in his mind. The humans' apparent weaknesses had a way of revealing themselves as strengths. He had studied their military history, and it told a troubling story. Every time humans faced a technologically superior force, they found unexpected ways to prevail. The first shots were fired not by either fleet, but by something in between them. Small, autonomous drones, another human innovation that baffled the Araxians, swarmed through space, gathering data and probing defenses. The Araxians responded by launching their own biological counterparts, living weapons that could adapt to any threat. Their drones are primitive, Crit transmitted with confidence, simple machines that cannot evolve or adapt. Our bioweapons will consume them easily. The first wave of contact seemed to prove him right. The Araxian bioweapons, shifting their forms to match each threat, easily overwhelmed the human drones. But then something unexpected happened. The remaining drones changed their behavior, not through biological adaptation, but through rapid software updates. They learned from their destroyed companions, adjusting their tactics in real time. "Impossible," Crit transmitted, his form flickering with distress. "They're adapting without evolving. They're learning." The space between the fleets became a chaotic battlefield of biological weapons and artificial intelligence, each side demonstrating their approach to adaptation. The Araxians' bioweapons evolved perfect counters to each drone design, only to find the drones changing their behavior faster than biology could keep up. Then the human fleet began to move, but not in any formation the Araxians could recognize. Each ship seemed to operate independently, yet somehow maintained loose coordination. Their movements appeared random, yet achieved tactical objectives the Araxians couldn't predict. "They're not following any known combat doctrine," Silex transmitted, his enhanced combat mind struggling to find patterns in the chaos. "Every ship captain appears to be making independent decisions." The truth was even more disturbing. The humans had developed a command structure that balanced central coordination with individual initiative. While the Araxian fleet operated like a single organism, each ship perfectly synchronized through their biological networks, the human fleet operated more like a swarm of independent beings, each contributing their unique perspective to the whole. The battle erupted in earnest as the fleets engaged. The Araxian ships, their forms constantly adapting to maximize combat efficiency, unleashed devastating biological weapons, living missiles that could penetrate hull armor, spores that could disable ship systems, neural disruptors that could confuse enemy crews. But the humans had prepared for biological warfare in ways the Araxians hadn't expected. Their ships were equipped with sophisticated containment fields, automated decontamination systems, and most surprisingly, beneficial bacteria and viruses that could counter Araxian biological attacks. They've weaponized their own microbiome, Silex realized with shock. They're using their long-term coexistence with other life forms as a defense. The battle shifted and evolved as both sides demonstrated their different approaches to warfare. The Erexians continued to adapt their ships and weapons to each new situation, achieving perfect but predictable responses. The humans, unable to adapt their ships physically, instead employed countless different strategies, techniques, and technologies, creating chaos that defied prediction. Their tactical diversity is overwhelming our combat algorithms, Crit reported, his form showing signs of stress. We perfect a counter to one strategy only to face 3 new ones. They're not trying to find the perfect approach. They're deliberately maintaining imperfect but unpredictable ones. The human fleet's apparent disorder concealed a deeper pattern that the Erexians struggled to grasp. Their ships would scatter in seeming retreat, only to reform in unexpected configurations. They would appear to make tactical mistakes, only to reveal them as carefully planned traps. Each human captain brought their own style and strategy to the battle, creating a complexity that no single perfect system could counter. As the battle raged on, Silex began to understand a fundamental truth about human warfare. Their greatest strength wasn't in their technology or their tactics, but in their ability to embrace chaos as a strategy. They didn't seek to perfect their approach. They deliberately maintained multiple imperfect approaches, making them impossible to predict or counter completely. All ships, reformed by the primary star, Silex finally transmitted. We must withdraw and reassess. It was not a retreat, he told himself, but an adaptation. The Erexians would need to evolve new strategies to face this unprecedented threat. As the perpetual evolution led the Erexian fleet in a tactical withdrawal, Silex contemplated the lesson they had learned. The humans' military strength, like their scientific advancement, stemmed from their very lack of biological adaptation. Unable to evolve perfect responses to threats, they had instead developed countless different responses, creating a complexity that even perfect adaptation struggled to overcome. Understanding through chaos. In the aftermath of the battle, the Erexian High Council convened an emergency session. The chamber's organic walls pulsed with unprecedented patterns of uncertainty as both First Observer Nexus and Warform Commander Silex presented their findings. Their defeat at human hands had shaken the very foundation of Erexian society. They should not have prevailed, Silex began, his combat form still showing signs of battle stress. Their technology is inferior, their biology static, their tactics chaotic. Yet they achieved what 12,000 years of perfectly evolved species could not. They forced us to retreat. The council chamber rippled with patterns of distress. The Erexians had long believed that their mastery of biological adaptation made them invincible. Every challenge could be met with perfect evolution, every threat countered with an optimal response. But the humans had proven this assumption false. Perhaps, Nexus suggested, her form shifting to display new analysis patterns, we need to reconsider our definition of perfection. She shared her latest research through the neural network. The humans' apparent weaknesses, their unchanging form, their reliance on artificial tools, their embrace of diversity, had created unexpected strengths. Their static biology had forced them to develop external solutions that could be shared and improved upon by others. Their physical limitations had driven them to explore possibilities the Erexians had never considered. Consider their approach to problem solving, Nexus continued. When faced with a challenge, we evolved the perfect biological solution. One problem, one perfect answer. But humans, unable to adapt themselves, must imagine multiple possible solutions. They test different approaches simultaneously, learn from their failures, and build upon each other's successes. The council absorbed this information in troubled silence. The very concept of maintaining multiple imperfect solutions instead of finding one perfect one was alien to their way of thinking. Yet the evidence of its effectiveness could not be denied. There is more, Silex added, sharing his combat data. Their military strength stems from the same principle. Instead of developing perfect tactics, they maintain a diversity of approaches. They don't try to find the one right way to fight. They deliberately preserve many different ways, making them impossible to predict or counter completely. The implications were staggering. The Araxians' pursuit of perfection had led them down a path of standardization and optimization. They had eliminated diversity in favor of finding the one perfect solution to each challenge. But the humans' unchanging nature had forced them to embrace diversity, to find strength in their differences rather than eliminating them. They appear to be evolving without evolving, one council member observed. Their fixed form forces them to evolve their understanding instead of their bodies. They adapt through knowledge rather than biology. High Coordinator Vex, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Show them the settlement data. Nexus projected new information into the chamber's neural network. Images of human colonies appeared, showing something that had previously seemed impossible. Humans were establishing outposts on worlds they could not possibly survive on naturally, but instead of adapting themselves to these environments, they were developing technologies that could terraform entire planets. They don't adapt to their environment, Nexus explained. They adapt their environment to themselves, and in doing so, they create worlds that can support multiple species, not just their own. The council chamber buzzed with new patterns of understanding. The humans' approach to adaptation wasn't just different, it was fundamentally more inclusive. Their solutions, born from their own limitations, could benefit other species in ways that perfect biological adaptation could not. And now they offer to share this knowledge, Vex announced, causing ripples of surprise through the chamber. Even after our attempt to subjugate them, they propose an exchange of technologies and ideas. They suggest that our different approaches to adaptation might complement each other. The concept was revolutionary. The Araxians had always seen other species as inferior, candidates for either subjugation or elimination. The idea of mutual benefit, of finding strength in different approaches rather than proving one superior, had never occurred to them. Perhaps, Nexus suggested carefully, this is why they have advanced so quickly. Their inability to adapt themselves has forced them to adapt their thinking. Their physical limitations have driven them to expand their minds in ways we never needed to. The council chamber's walls pulsed with new patterns, not the familiar rhythms of certainty and superiority, but something more complex, something more human. The very fact that they were questioning their own perfection, considering alternative approaches and learning from a supposedly inferior species represented a fundamental change in Araxian thought. We have always believed that perfect adaptation was the key to survival, Vex concluded. But these humans have shown us that imperfection itself can be a driving force for advancement. Their weaknesses have become their strengths, their limitations have sparked their innovations, and their diversity has become their greatest advantage. As the council debated the implications of these revelations, a new understanding began to emerge. Perhaps true perfection wasn't about finding the one right answer, but about maintaining the ability to explore many possible answers. Perhaps strength wasn't in achieving perfect adaptation, but in preserving the drive to keep adapting in new and unexpected ways. Evolution of perspective. One standard year after the battle that changed everything, the Great Hall of Earth's United Nations headquarters hosted an unprecedented gathering. Humans and Araxians stood side by side, their differences now a source of fascination rather than conflict. First observer Nexus, her form adapted for optimal diplomatic interaction, faced the assembled crowd alongside Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the human scientist whose questions had first sparked this revolution in thinking. The Araxian Dominion has always pursued perfection through biological adaptation. Nexus began, her iridescent skin displaying patterns of genuine emotion. We thought this made us superior to all other species. Today, we acknowledge that we were wrong, not about the value of adaptation, but about the nature of perfection itself. The hall's screens displayed images of the changes already taking place throughout both human and Araxian space. On countless worlds, the two species were working together, combining their different approaches to create something entirely new. Human ingenuity paired with Araxian biological mastery was yielding breakthroughs that neither species could have achieved alone. Humanity taught us something profound, Nexus continued. They showed us that limitations can be the mother of innovation, that diversity is not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be embraced. Their inability to adapt themselves forced them to adapt their understanding of the universe instead. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, sharing the latest data from their joint research initiatives. Human scientists working with Araxian biologists had developed new technologies that combined the best of both approaches. Environmental suits enhanced with living components, spacecraft that could both mechanically and biologically adapt to challenges, and medical treatments that merged genetic optimization with technological innovation. But perhaps most importantly, Rodriguez added, "We've learned from each other's perspectives on evolution itself." The Araxians showed us that biological adaptation could be consciously directed, while we helped them see that evolution isn't just about changing our bodies, it's about expanding our minds and our understanding. The screens showed new images, Araxian ships now incorporating human-style diversity in their designs, human colonies utilizing biological adaptation alongside their technological solutions, and most surprisingly, Araxians choosing to maintain multiple forms, rather than always seeking the one perfect configuration. We discovered that true advancement comes not from achieving perfection, Nexus explained, but from maintaining the ability to keep evolving, to keep questioning, to keep exploring new possibilities. The human's greatest gift to us was showing us that imperfection itself can be a source of strength. The changes weren't limited to technology and biology. Araxian society, once rigidly focused on optimization and standardization, was beginning to embrace diversity of thought and approach. Meanwhile, humans were learning to better understand their own bodies and biology, not to perfect them, but to work in harmony with their natural capabilities. Together, we're creating something unprecedented, Rodriguez announced, a partnership that combines biological mastery with technological innovation, perfect adaptation with imperfect creativity, standardization with diversity. We're learning that evolution isn't a race to an endpoint, it's an ongoing journey of discovery. The announcement that followed sent ripples of excitement through the assembled crowd. The Araxian Dominion and Earth's governments had agreed to establish a joint initiative, the Galactic Institute of Evolutionary Innovation. Its mission would be to explore all possible paths of advancement, biological and technological, perfect and imperfect, standardized and diverse. We once believed that our ability to achieve perfect adaptation made us superior, Nexus concluded, her form shifting to display patterns of hope and possibility. Now we understand that true superiority lies not in achieving perfection, but in maintaining the ability to keep growing, learning, and changing. As the ceremony concluded, observers noted something remarkable. The Araxians present were displaying vastly different forms, some optimized for their current tasks, others maintaining less efficient configurations that they found interesting or useful. They had learned from humanity that sometimes the perfect solution isn't always the best one. Meanwhile, the humans continued their own evolution, not of their bodies, but of their understanding. They incorporated Araxian biological insights into their technology, while maintaining their drive to explore multiple solutions to every challenge. Their fixed form remained unchanged, but their minds continued to adapt and grow. In the spaceports above Earth, and throughout human and Araxian space, a new era was beginning. Ships of both species, now featuring designs that merged biological and technological adaptation, prepared to explore the galaxy together. They carried with them a profound new understanding that the greatest strength lies not in achieving perfection, but in maintaining the endless capacity for change and growth. The galaxy's most feared species had indeed met their match in humanity, not through defeat, but through transformation. Together, they had evolved beyond the limitations of their original perspectives, proving that the most important adaptation of all is the ability to see the world in new ways.